Hello, hello, and welcome to Verbling. I'm teacher Oakley. For the next hour, we are going to be looking at gerunds and infinitives. In fact, at this hour, a few times this week, we're going to be looking at gerunds and infinitives. Today, our focus will be specifically on infinitive forms, infinitive different forms, verb tense forms of the infinitive. Goodness. Okay. In any case, gerunds and infinitives, these are forms of a verb that actually act more like nouns. Okay. I want, subject noun, want is the main verb. I want to learn to swim. To learn and to swim are infinitive forms that we use basically the same way we use object nouns. Okay, and in today's class, we're going to be looking at various verb tenses can be used in the infinitive form. We'll be looking at that and practicing them somewhat. And learning some special characteristics of using infinitives properly. All right. Okay, let me screen share here so you can follow along as we go along. By the way, plenty of room in the class. Come on in and join me anytime so I can answer your questions as we look at this information. All right, infinitive verb forms. Usually an infinitive can be the preposition to plus the infinitive, but we also have what's called a bare infinitive, meaning there is no to, just a verb. There is no difference in meaning or functionality between these two forms. However, some structures, usually verb structures, require a to infinitive, while others call for a bare infinitive. For example, a very normal mistake that I frequently see for English language users is using a regular infinitive form with a modal. Okay. There are situations where the to is omitted, okay, after most modal auxiliaries. For example, I ought to call them, okay, there's to plus the infinitive, I had better call them. In fact, the only modal forms where we actually use to is ought to, and ought to is always ought to, no matter what. We generally think of this modal. We think of most modals as one word. Should, could, would, might, may. After you use should, could, might, may, you cannot use to. You have to use I might call them, no to. I could call them, no to. I should call them, I would call them, no to, no to, no to. Only with ought to or have to. I have to call them, I ought to call them. I had to call them, past tense. Okay, when we have basically what's considered as a compound infinitive, compound modal, a modal made up of a word plus to, then the to has to be there because really it's more a part of the modal than it is the actual infinitive. Really, we always say ought to. You never say ought without to. It doesn't really exist. Okay, you can see here, I had better call them. well, had better. This is a special kind of compound here. But if I just used had, it would be I had to call them. Bare infinitive. This is an extremely common mistake and also one of the most common uses of the bare infinitive. Just placing it, placing an infinitive after a modal. Again, I might do it, I could do it, I should do it. Not I should to do it. Super common mistake. And by the way, in the negative, not usually comes before the infinitive. I ought not to call them. Okay. I had better not call them. In the case of modals, I might not call him. I could not call him. I should not call him. Okay. Even before the bare infinitive, not comes before the infinitive. Now this is specifically, again, we're thinking about modals here. All right. If we're thinking about regular use of infinitives in a regular sentence, it would be I don't want to call them. You would use it with your auxiliary, do. Okay. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. Hello.
Good afternoon. Hello. Hello. Okay. Sam, we're looking at infinitives here. Okay. Starting off with basically, I'm talking about how we can have infinitives we normally think of with to in the infinitive. We also have what's called a bare infinitive. That is, we use the verb, but we have no to in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
And I was just mentioning that that with modals, unless it's a phrasal modal like ought to or have to, a common mistake is using to with other modals like I might. You don't use, that's when you see the classic case of a bare infinitive. I might call him. Okay. I could call him. I should call him. All right. Bare infinitive. Okay. All right. In regular sentences, if it's negative, then you'll see the negative with the main clause, the main verb, as in I don't want to call them in a regular verb, as opposed to in a modal, for example, you would say I might not call him, like that. So notice the placement of not, because a modal is actually a kind of auxiliary, just like the auxiliaries or helper verbs we use to create verb tenses. So it's really the same thing. Do is the auxiliary, it follows the first auxiliary. It's really the same thing. I might not call him. Basically goes in the same place. Hello, Ken. Hi, welcome.
Yes, hello, thank you.
Okay. We're looking, welcome. We're looking at infinitives today. You guys are going to practice forming some sentences as we go along. Okay, it is important to remember the infinitive itself has no tense. It is not the main verb. All right. It does not in itself indicate the time of the action that it refers to. It's sort of neutral. In some cases, because of the definition of the verb, you can figure out some kind of temporal or time relationship between the main verb and the infinitive. Okay. sometimes it's, and that's basically what I just said is kind of obvious. I want to learn to swim. Obviously, you can understand that I want to means it's in the future. All right, so it's kind of obvious the time relationship between I want and to learn. It obviously means this is going to happen in the future. Okay, there are 4 types of infinitive, each of which has an active and a passive form. For example, what you usually think of when you think of infinitive, the simple infinitive, to write. Passive form would be to be written. All of the passive forms, the main part of the verb, just as in all passive verb tenses, all passives always, whether it's a verb tense like present perfect tense or future simple, it really doesn't matter. All passive verb tenses, the past participle of the verb is used. Same thing when we're looking at passive infinitives. Okay, well, where would you see a passive infinitive? Sam, can you create a sentence with to be written? Can you think of a sentence that makes sense? Hopefully. With to be written. We'll get into these more carefully, but Sam, are you there? Sam, hello? I can't hear you. Let me check with Ken. Ken, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
And yes, I hear you. Okay, Sam, I'm not sure what's going on, but I can't hear you right now. You're not muted, so I'm not sure. Ken, can you think of a sentence with to be written?
Yes, this document is written by Aubrey.
Well, no, to be written.
To be written.
Okay.
To be
Document.
written.
Okay, is to be written.
Is to be written.
Yes. By Oakland.
Okay, is the same meaning?
Okay, what did you say?
I thought this document is written by Aubrey.
Okay, well, okay, what we talked about with the time. Okay, that's good. We can use this as a good example. Okay, what was it? One more time. This document
is written by Aubrey.
Okay, well, first of all, this document is written by Oakley. Yeah, all right. I guess that's possible. It might be more common to say was written by Oakley in the past tense. Actually, this is a little weird. We would normally use past tense.
Okay, was written.
Probably the same thing. So, all right. So what's the difference? This document is to be written by Oakley. Okay, because of the relationship of the words, when will this document be written? In the past, now, or the future?
Now.
Actually, in the future.
Future.
Okay, so it does have a kind of a change in time here.
Yeah, same as Japanese tense. We don't have future tense, so sometimes we express a present tense to future.
Oh, okay. All right. You could rewrite this with just an active tense. Will be written in the future. It is possible you could just say will be written, which would be a simple future passive. All right, which is, so it's kind of strange. In many cases, you don't see many passive infinitive forms because usually, just like this, I can rewrite this in an active form. Well, I mean, without an infinitive, I can, with an, what am I saying? With the main verb being, okay, in an active form, the main verb is will be written. It's a passive, but I don't need to use the infinitive. All right, I don't need to do that. So we don't actually see the passive very often because usually you can rewrite it and use an active form, which we just tend to do. Okay. To be writing is the continuous infinitive, the perfect infinitive, to have written, perfect continuous, to have been writing. And yes, they do have passive forms. It's rare to run across these passive forms because they're not really necessary. All right, let's kind of take these one by one and we'll practice them as we go along. All right, simple infinitive refers to the same time as that of the preceding verb. Okay. For example, I was glad to see her. The to see part happens in the past just as the main verb was. He must be very happy. Must is present tense. Here, this is the infinitive of the verb to be, but because we're using a modal, there's no to. We do not say he must to be very happy. Not allowed. Instead, we use a bare infinitive. Okay, future tense, I will arrange a meeting with the manager. Okay, again, will acts like a modal. We don't say I will to arrange a meeting with the manager. All right, again, will actually it's a regular auxiliary for future tense. It's also a modal auxiliary. So any of these modals, except the ones that automatically have to, like need to or have to or ought to, because that's already part of the modal, they don't use to. They just use a bare infinitive. Okay, so what is the difference here between future simple tense and the idea that this is will with an infinitive? Nothing. They're exactly the same. They are one and the same. You could think of it in either way. The function is still the same. We're still talking about the future tense. The future simple is actually whatever you want to think of it. Do you want to think of it as a future simple? Do you want to think of it as the modal will with a bare infinitive? Doesn't really matter which way you want to think about it. It's the same exact thing, strangely enough. My son's football coach is said to be very strict. Okay, here we're using a passive form, present tense. Again, it would be very normal just to say my son's football coach is very strict. So again, these passive forms are, yes, they have their purposes and their uses, but it's not very common.
I think it said connotate somebody said or it is said, not only me but also other people said so.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the function. That's the idea.
Okay.
That's exactly the idea. Right. But regardless, this is actually a passive form, but we need to have an infinitive here. with it.
I see.
It's a little weird, but okay. Let's. I don't know if Sam's going to make it back. Sam, if you can. All right. All right. Ken, go ahead. Whatever you want to do. We've got past tense, present tense, future tense. Whatever you want to do. Can you try to make a sentence with the simple infinitive, to and a verb?
Simple infinitive.
Yeah.
That means 2 plus infinite. I mean original verb.
That's right. The original form of the verb. That's usually it. But again, there's some cases where there is no to, because that's a bare infinitive.
Okay.
Like I must go. Actually, this is really the infinitive. Go. I must to go.
Okay.
But we use a bare infinitive. We can't use to here.
The show must go on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Basically the same thing here. All right. Well, fair enough. Well, let's try another one more challenging. How about using one with a past tense? Like I was glad to see her.
I was exhausted last night.
Yeah. Well, where's your infinitive? This is was exhausted. This is
The passive. Yeah.
Yeah. Passive.
I was happy at that moment. But it's happy is not a verb. Yeah.
Yeah, right. These are both adjectives.
I was.
Okay, if you got something. When you think of infinitives, okay, there are some verbs that lend themselves to infinitives. They're often used with infinitives. Verbs like I wanted to do something, I decided to do something. I love to do something. I love, like, hate with to and a verb. Those are common.
Okay. I love to go to McDonald's.
Okay. Whoops. I alved. Okay. All right.
Because
Okay.
yeah.
All right. To go.
To go.
Okay. Now, okay. To McDonald's is a prepositional phrase. Here, to is considered to be a preposition with a prepositional phrase to show place. To go is an infinitive, right? So that's different. We don't to go. Okay, to with a verb. If we have to with a noun, that's a prepositional phrase. It's that simple. To with a verb is an infinitive. Okay. Yeah. Forget about future tense because it's exactly the same as simple future. That's what simple future is. It's will plus the infinitive. There's no chicken and egg thing. They're just the same thing. Okay. Never mind the passive. All right. We already did that, actually. Okay. Let's take a look at continuous infinitives. All right. The continuous infinitive refers to the same time as the preceding verb, the main verb. All right. And obviously, as all continuous anything, verb tenses or infinitives do, it expresses an action in progress or an duration, period of time. So, for example, I'm glad to be sitting here. Okay. All right. right now. Okay, so this has the idea of the action in progress. Also, we understand that it's present tense. These things are happening at the same time. I'm glad. You can't say I am being glad. All right, because it's a state. You can't use a continuous tense in this first form. It's impossible, right? But this form is actually a continuous infinitive. All right. You must be joking. Okay. All right. The verb to be and the infinitive. There it is. That's the form. Be and the infinitive, either to be and the infinitive, or here we see a bare infinitive, again with the modal. You must be joking. All right. Future tense, again, future tense looks exactly like a future continuous. Whatever, however you want to think about it, it's a modal will plus the infinitive form, or just normally we just think that's the future continuous. It's the same thing though. Okay, and here we have a passive. Vincent was reported to be staying in Paris at that time. Ooh, okay. All right, but in either case, we understand present present, also present present with a nodal, with a modal. Obviously, this is future. Okay, we understand that he was staying in Paris at that time in the past. Okay, so it agrees. Okay, now, Ken, you want to try creating an infinitive verb form using these examples?
I'm happy to be attending this meeting.
Okay. Okay. I'm happy to be attending this meeting. Okay. It's actually useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
For that specific situation, obviously. Okay. It sounds like something a human being might actually say. Okay. Well, all right. Which is good, because sometimes it's a little challenging when you're looking at these more unusual forms to have kind of practical looking sentences. But that's one. So good job. All right. Let's just, because there's only one of you, we're going to zip through this material much faster. So let's attempt a passive form, shall we?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, shall you?
Yeah.
Okay. The try.
Me? I make a sentence?
Yeah, you want to try?
Okay. Like you must be joking, right?
Well, I am no. A passive is like this last example.
This okay. Vincent was reported by this thing.
So the key is to have the verb to be in front of the verb. You don't have to use past tense. You know, was reported, is reported, will be reported, whatever. Huh.
The phrase was cited.
Sorry?
The phrase the quotation was cited.
Got it. I get you now. Okay.
To be writing in paper, in papers, in a paper. Yeah, in this sense.
Quotation was cited to be writing.
For a paper.
For the paper.
The paper, yeah.
That's a little bit weird. The quotation was cited to be writing. Yeah, that doesn't quite get it.
The phrase was cited to be writing for the paper. That makes sense.
Not really.
Hmm. What I wanted to say, that sometime in a paper we need to cite something from the book or document.
Uh-huh. Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. I'm trying to get the idea of the continuous action of writing and happening at the same time
Hmm.
as was cited, and I'm not getting it here. It doesn't quite match up for me. Doesn't really make sense.
Phrase was quoted.
The phrase was quoted. Yeah, I understand the phrase was quoted, the quotation was cited for the paper. That makes sense, but the to be writing here, I don't get it.
Let's see.
I'm thinking to be using for the paper. No, because that doesn't work because it doesn't make sense that it's happening at duration or at the same time. Doesn't kind of meet the criteria of the time. The same time as that of the preceding verb plus an action in progress or happening over a period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vincent was seen to be dancing
Okay.
at a club at that time.
There we go. All right. Now we got now I think we got it. I think you got it here. Was seen to be dancing at a club at that time. Again, with the passives, I mean, seriously, why wouldn't you say Vincent was seen dancing at a club at that time? Okay, in which case we'd be using what if we got rid of to be? If we got rid of it, Vincent was seen dancing at a club at that time. Now, what are we using? We're
Without to be seen. Confusing.
Confusing, but not. You're still using a passive. Was seen, but then you're following it instead of with a. Your sentence is correct.
Maybe, for example, in a trial, some people say the alibi, and the person seen him at the club said this phrase in a trial.
Right.
Or something like that.
Oh yeah, something very formal. Absolutely.
Right.
You're right. This would be normal. What I'm trying to express is that you to get the information across in ordinary conversation, it would probably be easier to use a passive followed by a gerund.
Okay. So
simpler.
Okay. So same meaning.
Same meaning.
Okay.
Exactly the same meaning. The meaning would not really change. Okay. Well, okay. One thing about infinitives versus gerunds. One fundamental generality is when we use it, sometimes we have a choice. I like to dance. I like dancing. What is the difference?
I like to dance means I want to dance. I like dancing is I like dancing.
Okay. Not exactly.
Not
okay. All right. There is a fundamental tiny difference in the inferred meaning. I like to dance infers you like the concept. First of all, you can think of it this way. The infinitive in general is more formal. Okay. It's a little more Okay, to to err is human, to forgive divine. All right, that's quite a formal expression. It's a common saying.
Mhm.
It's quite formal.
Mhm.
It's much more informal if you were to say uh, making mistakes is normal. Forgiving people is exceptional.
Mhm.
Would be a more normal conversational way to do it. What do? I change the verb a little, yeah, but I also use the gerund.
Mhm.
In general, infinitives are more, especially as a subject noun, definitely as a subject noun, infinitives are much more formal and gerunds are more conversational. Now, I like to dance. Basically, I like the concept, the entire concept of the dance.
Mhm.
Okay. The whole idea of it appeals to me. I like dancing actually probably means that you physically do it.
Mhm.
I enjoy the
I
activity,
see.
not the concept, but the activity. So it has a much more physical meaning.
Mhm.
So, okay, in your sentence with Vincent here, see the whole thing with which is correct. Again, I reiterate, your use of the infinitive verb form is absolutely correct here, but it just seems too formal for more normal use.
Mhm.
All right. So, like you said, maybe like legally in a legal document. So it's written and it's legal, which means it's kind of doubly important to be formal. You might see this just like this.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sometimes you see this in written news, in media, because it's quite formal.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Interesting. All right. And it helps, thank you. It helps bring out a very basic distinction between infinitive and gerund.
Mhm.
Um, okay. Let's look at what a perfect infinitive looks like. Okie doke. Um, the perfect infinitive, interestingly, refers to a time before that of the preceding verb. In other words, it's functioning like another verb tense. Okay. What verb tense do we use? Never mind infinitives and gerunds. What normal verb tense refers to an action that happened before another action?
Past perfect?
That is correct. Very good. Gold star for you, Ken, my man. You are absolutely correct. So this is kind of weird to think about. Why would we do this? And you're not going to see this very often because we have a regular verb tense that does this. All right. For example, I'm glad to have studied at that school. Think about past perfect, normal past perfect verb tense. How could you say this?
I'm glad to have studied it. I was glad that I had studied at that school.
Perfect. Very good, Ken. You're on a roll. Exactly. And we would probably choose to say it that way. However, this is fairly common, I have to say. It is possible to use past perfect, as you just did, with the same meaning. Yeah. Again, to me, this sounds a little more formal than what you just said.
I see.
Um,
Even though I'm glad is a present tense, but it's described the past.
mhm. I'm
Okay.
glad now. Well, this is being used like present perfect tense, something that happened in the past related to now,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And frankly, when I see this particular example, I'm glad to have attended your party would be a very formal way to thank someone.
I see. Mhm.
I am glad to have been able to attend your party. Good. All right. Quite formal.
Mm.
These infinitives always, to me, invoke formality,
Mhm.
frankly. All right, here with a bare modal, again, no two, because of the I mean, a bare infinitive because of the modal. They must have forgotten about the deadline. Well, it's actually quite common. Actually, I think this is probably the most common area where you see these different infinitive verb forms used with modals, like might and could and should. He might have forgotten. He must have forgotten. He could have forgotten. These are actually quite common. So I think this is a common area where you would see the infinitive verb forms used a lot. All right, here's a future. The next one. By next week, they'll have finished painting the rooms. Oh, okay. All right. All right. And again, with the future tenses, the form will have finished is exactly the same thing. And it is, in fact, a future perfect. That's all it is.
Maybe because maybe so no specific time. By next week, sometime next week, they finish. That's why future perfect is used here.
Well, you know, okay. However, it's easier for you to think about it, but there's more than one reason. Also, because will is considered a modal. It is. It is an auxiliary verb and it is a modal at the same time. So it functions the same way. It's really the same thing as must have forgotten, will have forgotten. Okay. They will have forgotten about the deadline by next week. Whatever. You could do the same thing. All right. And then finally, a passive. Lucy was assumed to have left the day before. Okay. Now, you know, in this case of the passive form, you almost have to use a past tense here. Well, no, not true. Lucy is assumed to have left the day before. No, that's fine.
Yes,
No.
because the first sentence is present tense, so it's similar structure. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In either case, all right. To have studied, I'm glad is present tense. This happened before. To have studied. All right. Okay. They must is actually present tense. Have forgotten. All right. Before. I guess that's all well and good. Lucy was assumed to have left the day before. All right. She left before she was assumed, obviously. So referring to a time before that of the preceding verb, I guess, is covered. Anyway, you want to try making one of these? Perfect infinitives?
Perfect infinitive and I'm glad to have attended meeting.
Okay.
Maybe sounds formal in the meeting.
I'm glad to have attended the meeting. Wow. Okay. You know what? It would be more normal sounding if you.
Yesterday. Okay.
Like that.
Yeah.
Talking about it after the fact, reporting it, more or less. I'm glad to have attended the meeting yesterday. Yeah. Again, you know. You know. I'm glad I attended the meeting yesterday. Say the same thing. Yeah. Okay. I guess you're using in your example, you're using the perfect infinitive because you're stressing that somehow attending this meeting is somehow in context is having an effect on now. It's important to the present now, even though obviously it happened in the past. Yeah. Okay. Infinitive forms, simple infinitive forms are a dime a dozen. They happen a lot. But some of these more you know, the continuous or the perfect, they're much rarer because there's usually a different way to express the same concept. And then, of course, the most complicated, perfect continuous infinitive. All right, so both things. Refers to a time before the preceding or the main verb, and expresses an action in progress or happening over a period of time. Well, okay. Let's take a look. I'm glad to have been living in Barcelona for the last 10 years. All right. I guess that's all there. All right. I'm glad, present tense, to have been living in the past. All right. He must have been waiting for ages. Again, I really think this is the most common times that you see these different infinitive forms used with modals. It's, he could have been drinking all night. Whatever. It's very common to use this. I can easily think of sentences like this example. Soon he'll have been running for 4 hours, and once again, it is this exact same. It is, in fact, a future perfect continuous tense. Same thing. Okay, and passive form. The organizers were thought to have been preparing for days. Okay. Ken, why don't you try one with a modal? Since, as I said, that's probably the most common time we use these special infinitive forms.
I should have started English earlier.
Okay.
Started learning English earlier.
Okay. Wait a minute. Well, that's something else.
Nothing else.
I said that's something else. Okay, very confusing. Okay, well, see, this is so confusing. Oh, God. Using one because I'm using all italics, and I'm driving myself crazy trying to type it. Two. Okay, what is this really? Okay, a perfect modal should have started. Okay, which is basically present perfect tense with a modal. Actually, what you have here is a gerund.
Yeah. Learning, waiting. Okay. Maybe because of this gerund, because of start, so it's different. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I get rid of that, I should have been, always been. Okay, always been, have been running, have been waiting, have been living. The to is there unless it's a bare infinitive, like in after must or will. So it would be bare here. There's no to. So that's it. I should have been learning English earlier. All right.
Same meaning of start learning, or
Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah,
what is the
basically.
difference?
Yeah.
Formal, informal?
This, I should have been learning English earlier. It seems quite. This is a tough one. This is very interesting. Okay, this is where English gets really weird. All right. It seems informal to me, not really formal. But you know why? This does not seem like. This does not seem like it is actually the perfect continuous infinitive to me. This seems like it should have been a perfect modal followed by the gerund. I can't tell which it is. And frankly, I don't think the greatest English professor in the world could tell me, is this a gerund learning or is this the perfect continuous infinitive? I don't know. I don't think it matters. Okay, much actually, as we've been looking at all class, how the will forms are all exactly the same as the normal will future tense forms. It's exactly the same. You can't tell the difference, and there is no difference in meaning. We've got the same thing going on here. I can't tell if this is supposed to be a gerund or supposed to be a perfect continuous infinitive. I don't know. Could be either. English is so weird. Okay. So it could be either, frankly. And I don't know how you could tell which one it is. All right. Passive infinitives. I think we fairly well covered this. Maybe we'll try it again. Your composition has to be typed. No, that's tricky because I don't like this from my perspective. This modal here, it's a lot easier for me to think of modals as being normal modals, might, could, should, would, and compound modals, ought to, need to, has to, had to. It's a lot easier for me to think of it as a compound modal. That's one thing. And then followed by a passive simple infinitive. So to has nothing to do with it. That's part of the modal, really. All modals they need to be followed by an infinitive, whatever it is. Oh, well, okay, so there you go. I'm wrong. So when I was saying I should have been learning, this has to be considered. Does it? No, I was right. It could be, no, it couldn't, could it? Okay. Yes. Should, okay. Very interesting, very confusing. I guess it has to be to have been, it should to have been learn. Oh, yeah, okay. Should to have been. No, should to be. Should to have. Okay. It has to be an infinitive form here because we need to follow all modals with a base, a bare infinitive, which would mean this doesn't work unless the whole thing is part of the infinitive structure. Wow, that's complicated. If you didn't follow that, don't worry about it because it really doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. Oh boy. Okay. Some other examples, just so you can see them. The spy's phone was believed to be being tapped. Passive continuous infinitive, it's rarely used. Ken, let's try this. How else could you say that? What would be a simpler way to say that?
Someone believed that the spy's phone was tapped.
Okay. Yeah.
Had been tapped or
Had been tapped or was being tapped.
Yeah.
Probably was being tapped.
Was being tapped.
Okay. It's very common to use it, as in it was believed the spy's phone was being tapped.
Right.
Okay. And then we have was believed and was being tapped. Well, okay. All right. Which I guess is still passive continuous infinitive. Was being tapped. To be being tapped. Crazy. All right. Passive perfect infinitive. This sonnet must have been written by Shakespeare. Okay. Again, I keep saying the same thing, but these Special infinitive verb forms are rare, but not that rare when you're talking about modals. Could have been written by someone else. All right, last one. The picture is believed to have been being painted for years. Passive perfect continuous infinitive. This is almost never used. Ken, can you think of a different way of saying this crazy sentence here?
It's believed to have been. It is believed that the picture has been printed for years.
Well, painted, not printed.
Printed.
Yeah.
Painted. Yeah, painted for years.
Yeah. Probably had been being painted.
Had been printed. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And you're right. And it's very common to use it.
But
is believed.
why past perfect? Maybe because of that
I don't know.
previous reason you explained. Present tense. I'm happy that. Yeah. Maybe that reason. It is a present tense, but past perfect follows.
Ah, okay. It is believed the picture. Okay, wait a minute. It is believed. Oh, because I want to. Yeah, if I want to use an infinitive, the other thing is the infinitive shows that it happens before. Yeah, like what I said before.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very complicated.
It is.
Okay.
I've been being painted. Painted for years. It is believed the picture had been being painted for years. Can't be have been. That doesn't make sense. Was being painted. This also might work. Was being painted. Oh, yeah. That is a little simpler. Yeah, that's probably the best one. Okay. Well, that was infinitely confusing. Thank you for sticking with me through that, Ken. I got to go. Got another class to get to. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.